If you woke up one day and suddenly received a birthday gift from your late husband, what would you do?
John, tell me the truth. Did you do this?
No, I knew nothing, I swear.
The woman's first reaction was to think her friends were playing a cruel prank, but when she tremblingly opened the package and pressed the switch on the old tape recorder inside, the voice she had missed day and night slowly rang out. In that moment, she realized that her dead husband seemed to have never truly left her. In the final moments of his life, he had written 7 letters for her with his own hands. Each letter had a task. Over the next full year, they would pull her step by step out of the abyss of despair and back into the world of the living. How deeply must a person who has already died love you, to cross life and death and pave the rest of your road for you? This time, we are talking about the highly rated tearjerker P.S. I Love You. Gerry was a true nightclub prince. Whenever he stepped on stage to sing, he could make the whole room cheer. His wife Holly, however, always sat in the corner with a stern face, becoming that boring housewife in other people's eyes. Although their personalities could not have been more different, the trivial routines of 9 years of marriage had already tied them tightly together. Like many couples worn down by reality, the pressure of daily life was a problem they could never escape. Cars, houses, and careers often became the source of their disagreements. Deep down, Holly was actually extremely insecure. At 19, she ignored her mother's fierce objections and married Gerry, who had nothing to his name. To prove to everyone that her choice had not been wrong, she desperately longed for material stability. She stubbornly believed that life had to follow a strict order: first a car, then a house, and only then a child. Sometimes, out of frustration, she even complained to her mother that she did not want to have children, because she feared she would be trapped in a cramped rent-controlled apartment for the rest of her life. This deep anxiety and fear of losing everything meant that even the smallest spark in daily life could trigger an explosion. Whenever Holly lost control of her emotions, she would shout for Gerry to leave, and Gerry would slam the door and storm out without holding back. But their fights were always followed by the fastest and softest reconciliations. Usually, in less than 10 seconds, Gerry would carefully poke his head back in and apologize first. Sometimes, he would even put on ridiculous clothes and dance to make his wife laugh, because Gerry knew better than anyone the fragility behind Holly's impatience. Through this cycle of arguing and making up day after day, their love only grew deeper, until they became irreplaceable to each other. But fate played a cruel joke on this deeply loving couple. Just when they thought they could spend their whole lives together, Gerry, only 35 years old, passed away forever from late-stage brain cancer. But what surprised everyone was that this funeral, which should have been heavy and solemn, was not held in a church, but in the bar the two of them had often visited. The mournful funeral music was replaced with Holly's favorite rock songs and the silly songs Gerry had written while he was alive. And all of this had been personally arranged by Gerry before his death. Their friends emptied their glasses of strong liquor and sang the cheerful melody together. This did not look like a memorial service that would leave everyone in tears. It looked more like a lively gathering of old friends. This man, who still racked his brain to make the people around him happy even at the end of his life, used this special way to tell everyone one thing: grief would not be reduced by even a fraction because of a grand ceremony. So it was better to let everyone's final memory of him be warm and full of laughter. Yet when the noise of the funeral finally faded, and Holly pushed open the bedroom door holding the urn, she completely broke down. The rent-controlled apartment she had complained about countless times for being too small and too crowded now felt unbearably empty and dead silent. The huge loneliness seemed ready to swallow her in the next second. She used to complain that the bed was too crowded, but now, she could only carefully place the urn on the nightstand, trying to pretend that her husband was still there to spend the long night with her. When longing surged uncontrollably like a tide, Holly could only pick up the phone in despair and call Gerry's voicemail again and again. All that came from the other end was a cold automated message, but she clung to it like a lifeline, calling over and over, until her phone died, just so she could hold onto her husband's living voice for one more second in the endless darkness. In the days that followed, Holly's life came to a complete stop. She stopped going to work and stopped answering any calls. All day long, she locked herself inside that cluttered room. She wore the shirt her husband had loved most while he was alive, humming Gerry's favorite songs again and again, as if only by doing this could she create the illusion that her husband was still by her side. Every late night, she would instinctively call out Gerry's name.
Gerry, get the light.
But when she reached her hand toward the space beside her, all that waited for her was an empty pillow. That sudden emptiness was like a knife, stabbing straight into her heart with perfect accuracy. The person who had once sworn to stay with her for life would truly never appear again. Sometimes she was so dazed that she even began hallucinating, faintly hearing her husband playing guitar in the living room. When she ran over to look, she really seemed to see Gerry sitting on the sofa as usual, smiling, but when she reached out to embrace him, that figure vanished like passing smoke, leaving her alone in the same spot, falling apart. The Holly who had once kept the home in perfect order was gone. In her place was a broken woman who wore her husband's old clothes all day, let the room fill with clutter, and exiled herself in endless longing. Just as Holly was sinking deeper into this fog, she turned around and found her mother and best friends standing at the door, staring in shock at the messy version of her. It turned out today was Holly's 30th birthday. She herself had completely forgotten. Her friends had come because they had received a mysterious invitation. Along with them came a package. Inside was a birthday cake, and the signature was actually Gerry's name. At first, Holly thought this was a prank by her friends, until they found an old tape recorder tucked into the corner of the cake box. The moment they pressed the switch, the voice Holly had missed day and night slowly filled the room.
Hey baby, surprise! I know this probably feels a little bit morbid, but I just hate the idea that I'm not gonna be there to see you freak out over turning 30. I mean, it kills me not to be there. I've written you letters that will be coming to you all sorts of ways. So, for starters, I want you to get dolled up and just go out and celebrate tonight.
It turned out that in the final days of his life, Gerry had already foreseen that Holly would collapse after his departure, so he had planned all of this in advance. The 7 letters were like 7 keys, each one meant to open in the year ahead, guiding Holly step by step out of the abyss of grief. Following the instructions from the tape recorder, Holly changed clothes and went to the bar with her friends, yet the roaring voices around her and the cheerful music were completely out of place with the loneliness in Holly's heart. That night, she hid in an empty corner, got blackout drunk, and kept mumbling Gerry's name. In the end, she only made it home with the support of her family, but although the process was still painful, the alcohol numbed her tightly wound nerves and unexpectedly gave her the most peaceful sleep she had had since her husband died. At this point, many people may wonder, why were Gerry's first words not comfort, but a firm order forcing her to go out and have fun? There was actually deep psychological wisdom in this. When a person falls into severe grief, their inner world becomes closed off and rigid. At that moment, any empty words of comfort are useless. What she needs most is a concrete instruction she can actually carry out. Gerry used exactly this instruction to smash the tomb Holly had built for herself deep in her subconscious, forcing her back into the living, breathing world. Although Holly was still in pain at the bar, this was already an enormous step, because she was finally willing to take action. Early the next morning, reminded by her friend, a hungover Holly ran downstairs as fast as she could. Sure enough, she found Gerry's first letter in the mailbox. In the letter, Gerry did not write some unforgettable words of love. Instead, he made 2 strange requests. The first was to buy a remote-controlled bedside lamp. The second was to buy a dazzling, flashy evening dress. These 2 seemingly unrelated requests actually had private memories that only the 2 of them understood. In the past, Holly had always been reluctant to spend money on a bedside lamp. Every time she turned off the light to sleep, she would stub her toe in the dark. When the newly bought remote-controlled lamp was installed, Holly lay in bed turning it on and off again and again, as if she could see her husband's doting smile. That was the first time she truly felt that Gerry had not left. His remaining warmth still lingered in every corner of the room. Before long, the second letter arrived right on schedule. In the letter, Gerry revealed the purpose of the dress. He wanted Holly to wear it, return to that familiar bar, and bravely get on stage to sing a song. This request instantly touched a shadow in Holly's memory that she could never let go of. Back then, under the crowds cheering and Gerry's goading, Holly had used her drunken courage to step onto the stage. She had wanted to take the chance to vent her usual frustrations toward her husband, but because she became too emotional, she accidentally tripped over a wire. Not only did she break her nose, but her ankle was badly injured as well. That embarrassing and painful experience left her terrified of stages from then on. But Gerry knew that deep down, Holly wanted to express herself and enjoy singing. He felt both heartbroken and guilty about that accident, so he wanted Holly to return to the scene of that old failure, not to relive the pain, but to let a new, stronger version of herself cover over that fragile and embarrassing past. In psychology, this method is called exposure therapy. The most effective way to overcome fear is not avoidance, it is returning to the place that frightens you, and using a brand new experience to rewrite the old traumatic memory. This time, there was no friend egging her on, and no husband pushing her. Holly stepped onto that stage, both familiar and strange, with absolute determination. Under the spotlight, She looked radiant, although every seat below was filled. Wherever her eyes landed, it was as if only Gerry existed. The deep love in every lyric lingered in every corner of the bar. When the song ended, Holly was already in tears. Her friends were also lost in that moving melody, unable to calm down for a long time. Not long after, Holly found the third letter among the clothes returned from the dry cleaner. This time, Gerry made a request that was extremely cruel, yet absolutely necessary. He wanted Holly to keep only one of his leather jackets, then pack up and throw away all the clothes and daily items he had left behind. To Holly, throwing away her husband's belongings felt like personally erasing every trace that he had ever existed, but through the countless threads of reluctance in her heart, she still decided to follow Gerry's request without condition. As the things that belonged to Gerry were cleared from the home one by one, Holly felt as if her own heart had been emptied too. But strangely, along with that complete clearing, a subtle feeling of release also rose inside her. She had finally taken a real step, starting to return to work and seriously face life again. Everything seemed to be moving in a better direction. Before she knew it, time had reached the heat of summer. At this point, Holly also received the fourth letter her husband had left behind. Following the instructions in the letter, Holly came to a travel agency. When the staff members she had never met saw Holly's name, her eyes instantly turned red. It turned out that before his death, Gerry had dragged his seriously ill body here to carefully arrange a trip for Holly and her two best friends. With a sense of anticipation for the unknown, Holly and her friends arrived in Ireland. There, Gerry had rented them a huge villa with picture-perfect scenery. It was exactly the big house Holly had once dreamed of but had never been able to have. This man had never forgotten a single one of her wishes, and on the table inside the villa, the fifth letter lay quietly waiting. Unexpectedly, this letter was not written to Holly, but to her best friends. In the letter, Gerry thanked her friends for staying by Holly's side, and especially asked them to take Holly fishing by the lake into the town's love song bar, the one she loved most. That night, in that familiar bar, Holly was stunned to discover that the resident singer William not only looked a lot like Gerry, even the song he played and sang was the same one Gerry had sung when he confessed his love to her years ago. In an instant, the floodgates of Holly's memory were thrown open. Back then, Gerry had held his guitar, walked through the crowd just like this, confessed to her with a song, and sealed their love with a kiss. The sweetness of the past now turned into the sharpest blade, stabbing deep into her heart. Holly could no longer bear it and fled the bar without looking back. Gerry's arrangement at the bar was actually meant to help Holly understand that beautiful memories should not become chains trapping her, but strength supporting her to keep going. Memories hurt not because they were not beautiful, but precisely because they were too beautiful. And truly letting go does not mean forgetting. It means being able to remember with tears in your eyes and a smile on your face. The next day, following Gerry's plan, her friends took Holly fishing on the lake. During the casual waiting, one friend who had originally planned to stay child-free suddenly announced that she was pregnant, and another older single friend shyly admitted that she was about to step into marriage. Everyone had begun a brand new chapter, while only Holly was still spinning in the same place. A crushing loneliness surrounded her once again. The real purpose behind Gerry's arrangement was not to make Holly hurt herself by seeing these scenes. It was to let her see with her own eyes that time does not stop and wait for anyone. Her friends' lives were moving forward, and she should not pin herself forever to the same spot. The next stop on the trip was to visit Gerry's parents. This was the first time Holly had gathered the courage to step into this place since her husband's death. Her heart was filled with unease, because back then, Gerry had gone against his parents' objections and left home to be with her. She had always worried that Gerry's parents held resentment in their hearts, yet the two elderly parents welcomed her with the warmest embrace. They did not blame her at all. They only regretted not being able to stay by their son's side in his final days. From the way they looked, Holly also noticed that they had moved through the pain of losing their son much faster than she had expected. And this was exactly the deeper meaning behind Gerry arranging for her to come here. He wanted Holly to see with her own eyes that the pain of losing someone closest to you was not impossible to cross. Time, in the end, can soothe every wound. It was also here that Holly received the sixth letter. This letter contained no task and no arrangement. It simply, gently told the story of the moment they first met. That year, 19-year-old Holly had just graduated from college and was wearing a dress as colorful as a rainbow. Lost on a country road in Ireland, Gerry, passing by, was deeply drawn to this bright foreign girl and took the initiative to guide her. Along the way, Holly spoke passionately about art and creation. Back then, Holly had light in her eyes and dreams in her heart. Although Gerry only half understood what she was saying, he was deeply moved by her passion for the future, and he remembered one sentence clearly: My career is to create. After reading this letter, Holly finally understood Gerry's painstaking intention. He had taken her back to her original dream to remind her that before she became Gerry's wife, she was first Holly, the creator who was passionate about art. Over the years, for the sake of life, she had given up her dream and worked a job she did not like. After returning home, Holly decisively quit the job she had long grown tired of. She settled down and began thinking seriously about what she truly wanted to do. As if guided by fate, one day, she discovered that a metal buckle from her husband's overalls had landed perfectly on the top of her shoe. The metal buckle and the leather texture complemented each other, adding a special charm to the otherwise plain shoe. In that instant, inspiration burst out like a spring. She took out paper and colored pencils, eagerly drawing all kinds of fresh shoe designs. She also signed up for a design class and began learning sewing from scratch. Not long after, she brought a pair of stunning wedding shoes she had designed by hand to her friend, who was trying on wedding dresses.
Oh my God! These are gorgeous!
I've been taking a class. It just happened out of the blue. I really love it.
Love that.
Time kept pushing Holly forward. She became a somewhat well-known designer and created many fresh and distinctive works. Her life also seemed to have fully returned to the right track. With the encouragement of her family and friends, she even gathered the courage to try meeting someone new. But on one date with a suitor, when he made a gesture Gerry used to make, Holly instinctively called out that name.
Gerry, stop it.
Daniel. I'm Daniel.
That slip instantly shattered every disguise Holly had worked so hard to build. She suddenly realized that the man who had already sunk into her bones was someone she could never cut away. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how successful her career became, no matter how strong she looked, her heart was still covered in wounds. She broke down and ran home, throwing herself into her mother's arms and sobbing.
What happened? This wonderful man happens to me, and then he died. What was the point? I know. I'm so angry I could kill somebody.
Her mother quietly held her, shedding tears with the same understanding, because when Holly was little, her mother had also lost her own husband. She too had experienced that loneliness and helplessness of being completely abandoned. To comfort her daughter, her mother took her for a walk in the park and pulled the 7th letter from her pocket.
I have to say I was impressed by how he worked everything out ahead of time.
At this moment, the mystery was finally revealed. It turned out the mysterious person who had been mailing Gerry's letters all along was none other than Holly's mother. Before he died, Gerry had asked Holly's mother to help complete this plan, although she had strongly disliked the idea at first, believing it would stop her daughter from starting a new life. In the end, she was still moved by Gerry's deep love that crossed life and death, and accepted this heavy request.
It's the last one.
Holly opened the final letter with trembling hands. This time, Gerry did not arrange any task in the letter. There was only overflowing gratitude and a deeply loving goodbye. He thanked Holly for becoming his wife, and also thanked her for completing his life. But he also told Holly that he was only one chapter in her life. There would be many more stories in the future. He hoped Holly would not be afraid to fall in love again. The final signature read, P.S. I will always love you. This was the signature on every letter, and also the 3 words Gerry could never say enough. And after reading the letter, Holly finally found peace. She had once thought these 7 letters were proof that Gerry could not bear to let go. But in the end, she understood that none of the letters were meant to hold her back. They were teaching her, little by little, to loosen the hand that was holding onto him. From the first letter forcing her out the door, to the final letter saying goodbye, Gerry spent an entire year turning a Holly who thought she could not live without him into a Holly who could still live well without him. With the ending of this final letter, every practical arrangement Gerry had left in this world came to a close. Death took Gerry's body away, but it could not take away the traces he left behind. Every word in those letters had already grown into a part of Holly's life. In the days that followed, Holly continued down her path as a designer. She traveled everywhere with her mother, and often returned to Ireland to visit Gerry's parents. She did not immediately begin a new relationship, but she was no longer afraid of life, and no longer resisted the future. On the surface, this film is about loss, but at its spiritual core, it explores self-rebuilding and the true meaning of love. Gerry's departure was like a sudden storm, drenching Holly's world until it shattered into pieces. But he did not simply disappear. He stood in advance at the other end of time, laying out the road of the next full year for her inch by inch. When we are young, We always think love means possession, staying glued together every moment, but this film shows us another face of love. It is not the kidnapping of, "What will you do without me?" It is the fulfillment of, "Even without me, you can still live well." 7 letters, 7 pushes. Each one pushed Holly one step farther toward independence, until she could finally stand firmly inside her own life. Gerry did not say, "Remember me forever." What he said was, "Move forward." That is probably the highest form of love, not gripping the other person so tightly that they cannot leave, but before leaving, shaping them into someone who will not fall. Even when facing the storm alone, even if I am no longer by your side, everything I left behind can still become your armor against this world. So if you too are going through some kind of loss, please allow yourself to grieve, but please also believe that the people who truly loved you have never really left. They have simply changed form, and moved into every choice you make, every brave step you take, and every morning when you begin again.